brilliant presentation and bloody scary. The Green Party, as you said, have this one. I have a few copies of this. What's wrong with TTIP? This is issued by the European Green Party, including Jean Lambert. The party, we were told last night as well, is producing a flat pack, they now call them, campaign pack to campaign on TTIP, and we did pass a motion last night to get down to it. We are against it all the time, but get and do something with it, and it'll be. We'll take questions now, but before we do, we have one other normal tradition in the Green Party, and that's politics costs money, so we will pass the bucket around, please. If you haven't got any money, don't worry about it, but if you have, and if you happen to be a secret millionaire or something, we could do with 250,000 for next year's election. And are not registered abroad, like I mentioned. So we'll set that. And a silent collection would be nice as well, so you won't interrupt people asking questions. And you can get these after the event. And we've also got some back copies of Free World there if anybody would like them. We've also got t-shirts, but they're a tenner each. And Mark has tons of good stuff there, over there, badges and so on. So, Right, we'll take questions now. Yeah, and then you, that's two, yeah.
I have a question for each speaker, but maybe I should just ask one.
Yeah.
Then I can come back later.
Yeah.
So, on TTIP, I thought I knew a lot about TTIP, but then I realized there are even worse horror stories. But I sense in Europe as a whole, from what I know about the campaigns all across Europe, that's no longer the problem. We've got plenty of people who are alarmed enough to be campaigning, to be sending email messages to their MEPs in particular. And that's what I want to ask you about. The European Parliament has become perhaps the major focus for lobbying in favor of TTIP and against, but we seriously lost a crucial vote. I mean, how we lost it is a complex story. And I asked Jean Lambert a few months ago, why is it so difficult to persuade MEPs to oppose TTIP? And that's particularly from the Conservative group and maybe some other groups. The Greens, the United Left, and most of the Socialists are voting against, but that's not enough. And she said, because it's really difficult to engage them in a debate about any of the issues that you described. All you get is this mantra of jobs and growth, jobs and growth. And she said it's a more general problem about almost any political issue. They just repeat that phrase to justify supporting something or opposing something. And I asked her, how can that be? What's going on? And she said, fundamentally, they don't have anything to offer the people. They have no political program. That is the European People's Party in particular, which is the largest. They have nothing to offer the people to make people's lives better. So they're desperately searching for anything, such as TTIP, to pretend that they have something to offer. And precisely for this reason, they won't engage in debate. All you get is what you call these myths, which come more from the European Parliament than anywhere else, because they don't have to justify the myths. They don't have to engage in these debates, unlike a government, which might have to engage in them. So you have this weird situation which leads me to think about an analogy to the run-up to the attack on Iraq, where the opposition had all this well-informed arguments, but the MPs wouldn't engage in the arguments and voted for it anyway. So there's a danger of people becoming fatalistic about this. I mean, we need some better strategy to force the MEPs, firstly, to engage in the debate, and then to vote against it. So what would that take?
We'll do two.
My first bit is mainly for Eliot. I'll wait for my further input on TTIP. I'm a guitar learner, and one of the things that I've heard from my local music shop is that nearly all guitars these days on the sort of entry market are made in China, and so that has obviously ecological ramifications. And my guitar teacher tells me that there really is a huge surge in schools for ukulele as an instrument, and so I wonder where those ukuleles for the mass market are made. And by comparison, I've seen things on make your own homemade musical instruments out of sort of milk cartons and the like. Yeah.
We'll take one more question. The lady alongside you. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's that this issue is could some extent be resolved by, these days you can get drums with no body and get double basses that just have you don't have to have all that wood.
Immaterial.
Yeah, you don't have to have all that wood.
Okay. We'll do those three now. You can go first.
Yeah, good question. There was lots of different angles through which to answer it. Where to start? I guess to take it from the other end, so saying how to stop it. There are different avenues through which we can stop TTIP. Winning a vote in the European Parliament is but one. Because TTIP will be declared a mixed agreement, that means in all likelihood it will have to be voted on by every single one of the member states in their parliaments. So that's 28, if you include the European Parliament, 29 opportunities to stop the deal. Everyone has a veto. We at War on Want have a slightly different approach, I think, and perspective on EU politics, but certainly the way I would conceive of it and the way that I think organisationally we would conceive of it is that the European Parliament is dominated by a bargain, a neoliberal bloc, which is both the centre-left and the centre-right, the Socialists and the Democrats and the EPP, who agree to push certain things through together. And once they do that, you can't stop it because the numbers outweigh everybody else. And so in that context, when we look at that TTIP resolution, and I know it's very easy to say, well, maybe we're just turning this to make our work look positive, but for us that was a real win because a huge number, well not a huge number, but a significant proportion of Socialist and Democrat MEPs who had said they'd never vote against it, did vote against it. And that included the British Labour MEPs, who didn't shout about that. If you went onto the Twitter feeds of individual MEPs, they just said things like, we voted to protect public services, we voted to do X or Y. They never actually said, we voted against the whole TTIP resolution. But they did. All bar one, who was following, I don't know if this is what you call it in the EU Parliament, but the whip that he had to, because of his administrative role. And that happened simply because of what you also mentioned, this bombarding of parliamentarians and the issue getting oxygen, and in no small part thanks to groups like 38 Degrees who've harnessed thousands of people to send these emails. I perhaps say I don't know if 2.4 million people across Europe, it's a continent with I think around 800 million, so I don't think we've reached our ceiling in terms of activating people and making them aware. In the UK we had about 250,000 people, I might have that wrong, a bit more, sign the petition here. But to my mind it's clear that there's another ceiling we can break through, because you don't see TTIP, other than when it's linked onto another news issue, appear in the mass market tabloids. So the EU vote postponement appeared in the Daily Mirror because they mistakenly ran it as a UKIP story. That UKIP had stopped this vote, or UKIP had created a scene. Likewise, when we got Jamie Oliver to meet Vince Cable to raise food concerns, that made the Daily Mail. But they're not zeroing in on this incredible loss of sovereignty, our inability to do X or Y, which you would expect them to. So, yeah, we do need better strategies, and one that I often find myself arguing for amongst some allies is that we need to be much better in how we reach out to the media. Because there's a misconception that there's a media blackout around TTIP, and I don't think that's true. I think the challenge is on us about how we package stories around TTIP to the media. We need to be much better at personalising it, making it about the mother who worries that the food she gives her child is going to be contaminated by growth hormones or pesticides, and not just write 2,000-word analytical comment pieces in The Guardian, which are seen by the same people all the time. So yes, there do need to be better strategies, but I mean, if we could do what Germany is doing in terms of, they have tens of thousands of people turn up for their days of action. If we can reach that level where it really is a national political hot potato in Germany, to coin a cliche, then we'll be onto a winner.
This Saturday is, isn't it?
There's
the 38
the
degrees
38 degrees,
day.
yeah, it's 22nd of August. That's 38 degrees one, yeah.
Yeah, and this continues from Les's question, really. If there are going to be 1 million job losses, it should in principle be possible to identify the sectors most at risk,
Yes.
the types of enterprise most at risk. So that gives some possibility for localised and sector-specific mobilisation of the people who will be affected, place-wise, union-wise, etc. I also think that, the way you put it today was so beautifully simple. The official study says there will be 1 million job loss. However, MPs and MEPs continue to maintain blah blah blah. That would be an almost perfect text for a big advertisement that you pay like several thousand pounds for to have in a main newspaper. And since Guardian readers probably agree with us anyway, maybe the place to put it would be somewhere like the Daily Mail.
On that, just so I'm very specific here, the 1 million job losses is between the EU and the US, and that breaks down to about 685,000 in the EU and around 325 to 350,000 in the US. That's the broad split, and that is at the best outcome.
Best case scenario.
Yes. So it could be a hell of a lot worse. And sorry, I just realised as that was being said, there was something else I wanted to answer about from what you said earlier. MPs, MEPs and their faith in this. It's very interesting. If you look at the US discourse around TTIP, you'll see people like, they may not be names that are well known here, but people like Stiglitz, Paul Krugman, Robert Reich, who's a former Labour Secretary under Clinton. These are kind of liberals coming out and saying we cannot let TTIP and TPP go through, because quite simply they've seen what happens.
With NAFTA.
Exactly, they've seen what happened with NAFTA, they've seen the results of that. Whereas here, I think, and especially with people like Vince Cable, who was the Liberal Business Secretary seeing this through, there's this faith in, well, I hope I've dismantled the notion that it's free trade, but there's faith in the idea that if it's a trade deal, if you're boosting trade, it can only be good. And we've met with him before, and he said, to paraphrase, what's good for business is good for people, surely. And that is the kind of dominant narrative that I think you find in a lot of these, especially centrist, centre-left liberals, or the more kind of right-wing traditional conservative market-based ideology, that somehow trade is just good for business, and what is good for business will be good for society as well. When of course, I'm sure the people in this room probably have a somewhat different perspective.
But you've got two questions.
Sure. So, to answer the first one, which was on basically mass-produced instruments coming from particularly the East, China being the example given. I think basically the fact that most guitars tend to value rosewood as an instrument, and the fact that rosewood is priced at I think it was $5,000 per tonne, probably means that the average £50 classical guitar you'd get from most music shops probably won't be made of rainforest woods. It will be more likely made of something a bit more locally able to be produced, and a little bit more, potentially more environmentally sustainable, although I wouldn't go as far as to say it'd probably be FSC certified.
What about the musical quality?
But the quality of the instruments is variable. So, you know, if you're going to be spending between 50 and 15,000 on an instrument, you're going to get a massive jump in quality between the two.
Yeah.
I mean, I have with me two bows today. One of them is a £450 bow, and the other one is the one I mentioned, is well over 1,000. And the difference in quality even between those two is significant. When it comes down to beginner instruments, again, they are generally produced to be able to figure out the technique ways of playing sound on a guitar. And on a violin, again, you get the instruments made by a company called Stentor, who mass-produce violins as well. Again, they are basically put together largely by machine and not made in a craftsman-like way as much. They're designed just to get a sound which you could hear to reflect back on. Whereas with a professional quality instrument, obviously you're looking much more at the resonant quality of the instrument and how that instrument reverberates internally as well, which is a real craft that's learned by luthiers. And with relation to ukuleles, they're a lot easier to make because they don't actually tend to have that much sound variety. They're kind of supposed to sound a little bit jangly, I think. And for schools, again, they're fantastic because it's a brilliant way of engaging kids with music. And actually, I do work in a school. I work in Westminster City School, which is near Victoria. It's a state academy. Although I'm not sure the state and academy should be in the same sentence, but that's another matter. Of course, we've seen our departmental costs cut enormously. I've only been there a year, but I remember when I first joined, essentially I was told there is no budget to pay for books for the students, like they have to buy them themselves or you'll have to buy them for them, which is a real shame. And of course, you know, I've done the best I can with sourcing old books from private students, making sure I'm passing them on. But it's a real issue in an underfunded state school where it's obviously, I'm going to say underfunded in the right way, but you know, it's not receiving the right funding for music education, which is a vital part of the majority of students. Arts is important. There's been a really interesting initiative by the pianist James Rhodes, which was to take a national campaign to get people to donate unwanted instruments to schools so they could be used by students, which I think saw some like thousands of old violins, pianos, everything donated, which was fantastic. A lot of schools did find they were unusable because they were in unplayable conditions, though I think a lot of schools did get a lot of that as well, which has been welcomed a lot within the industry. So basically it comes down to the trade-off between quality and affordability, mostly for beginners, is quite difficult because the majority of people feeling the squeeze of austerity aren't going to be able to pay £50 to £150 for a beginner's violin set when that could be their weekly fuel bills and food instead. So actually making these things available is part of the problem, and making sure they're done in an environmentally friendly way is very difficult, particularly with the potential for forced labour or very underpaid labour in China, for instance. So that's a really interesting question, and it's something that we need to look into as well. With regards to electric instruments, that's also a really good question. I'm currently in the market for an electric viola because they do sound pretty cool if you plug them into an amp and get some overdrive. It's like an electric guitar, it's brilliant fun. I have a friend who got a custom-made electric, which cost him several £1,000s. The majority of the off-the-shelf ones for an electric instrument, though the materials used may be slightly better than endangered wood, are not suitable for the professional stage because of incredibly conservative stereotypes, with a small c conservative, about the music industry. If I went on the stage in my tuxedo to give a recital and my instrument was made out of carbon fibre, people would be incredibly confused to start off with. There have been experiments with making instruments out of carbon fibre. There was a famous example the other way that came up I saw it on social media, where someone had made a cello out of polystyrene, and it sounded remarkable. It was phenomenal. It was incredible sound innovation, and it actually sounded better than a wooden instrument. But you know, if you're coming on with your flat pack, to use the word again, your flat pack instrument, it's not going to look quite as good if you're in a tux at a very, very expensive venue for someone's wedding, is the point. And it's about challenging the stereotypes. You've got to strike the balance. Electric drum kits are a good example. The school I work in has one of those and an acoustic kit. Unfortunately, they're currently quite expensive compared to acoustic kits. And if you are picking up, again, it comes down to the cost point, where most beginners, when they're thinking of sustainability, probably aren't thinking of sustainability. They'll be thinking of, can I get a £50 violin, or can I get a £300 electric, which requires an amp, which is probably also another £50. Unfortunately, it is an issue where we also need to look into. The best way to do it is to work with luthiers and ensure that they're sourcing responsible wood, and also to challenge the mass-produced market and make sure that they are responsibly paying workers and sourcing good quality wood.
Thank you. We've run out of time for this session. Thanks very much for coming. It would have been nice to have more, but I think you will agree there was well worth the time for two very interesting and diverse speakers, which is our whole idea. You get to hear things you wouldn't normally hear. And the next meeting is on the 29th of September here again. It's been booked already, and we have a really excellent speaker on nuclear power, who is CEO of an international anti-nuclear organisation, and really up on the politics of it, and spends a lot of his time on Iranian state television as well. So he really knows his stuff. And the other speaker is will be, if she doesn't have to run off to America again, will be whistleblowing in the NHS and how to survive the NHS, which is part of her. She's writing a book on the issue, and Pete will speak on trade union issues. So that's the three of them. Another announcement I have, on the 26th of August, which is only, less than 10 days away, here we have our annual Green Party Trade Union quiz. Now, it's not a quiz about trade unions, or there'll be the odd, I always try to get a few obscure left-wing questions in to upset the lefties in the party. And Pete usually does one round for himself as well. So it'll be a fun quiz anyway, and it's 7 o'clock on the 26th of August. Everyone's like to come. We'd even love you to bring a team. You don't have to be Green Party. In fact, we love taking money from people who haven't Green Party for a change. So come along. We'll probably pass the book around, but this is for the Green Party Trade Union Group. Pete is the General Secretary and the Chair, and we need money for a new leaflet, and we need a new banner. So, and we don't get too much from the central parties, so we're generally self-sufficient. So if you can come to that on the 26th, we'll love it. Now we'll have some drinks and things. The two speakers hopefully are staying on for a while, and in the breakout room out there, if you give Rosemary a few minutes, we'll get the drinks out.
Can I just make a very quick announcement?
Yeah.
There's going to be a major march for homes and jobs in Haringey on the 19th of September, and I put a couple of leaflets out there on the blue thing on the right. And part of what it's about is the proposed assault by the council and the regeneration developers on the Broadwater Farm estate, which they want to redevelop and put huge towers, which will be mainly private housing. There's leaflets about that as well.
Thank you. And as I said, we have the leaflets here. They're all free. Mark has brought a ton of stuff over there. So
the Radical Housing Network.
Yes.
The Radical Housing Network has a website with links to all the housing action groups in London.
Yeah.
This is for Focus E15.
Including...
Was that the one you mentioned on the 19th?
No, this is a different part of London.
Okay, sorry.
E15 is a long way from Haringey.
That's right. Yeah.
All of these struggles are actually very much prototypes each of each other. I mean, it's about the financialisation of housing and big money taking over.
Yeah. And I was at a demo against Genesis Housing Association in Camden yesterday. They are saying we're keen to ditch social housing building and go in for the private market, even if it means us paying back money to the government for what we've had in terms of social funding, and they're linking it heavily with Policy Exchange, which is the think tank put forth by Michael Gove.
Yeah.
And all the councils are colluding with this, or even leading this assault on social housing, low-cost housing.
As the London campaigns coordinator, if anyone wants to raise any campaigns with me that we should be focusing on over September, please do come and talk to me afterwards, and I'll be happy to note that down.
You're
The regional campaigns coordinator for London,
oh, I didn't realise that. Oh,
For the
okay.
Green Party.
as well as
Right.
the other thing.
Okay, yeah, let's talk.
And to add you to even more active,
Yes.
we have a meeting tomorrow night in his flat of the Disputes and Actions Committee, the Green Party Disputes and Actions Committee, which we've just set up to coordinate, get the people onto the stage. You're all welcome to come.
So if you like demonstrations or actions or assorted drinks with other Greens, then come down tomorrow night and let me know.
And as I say, take those